The forgotten prisoner. The prison was dark. Silent and endless metal walls stretched like a maze, carrying the smell of rust and fear. Inside one of the cold cells sat a single human, thin, weak, and forgotten. His name was not written anywhere. No one remembered his rank, and no one spoke of his battles. He had been captured during a war between Earth and the Empire, and for many long years he was left behind. He would stare at the ceiling each day, wondering if anyone knew he still lived. Sometimes he thought maybe his people had given him up, or maybe they believed he was already dead. Still, his heart did not break. He whispered to himself, "Humans do not give up, not even in cages." Guards walked past his cell with cold eyes, never speaking to him, only delivering small bowls of tasteless food. He survived because he refused to die. He wanted to live one more day, to see Earth again, to feel the sun. His dreams of home kept him alive. One night the silence broke. 2 alien officers entered the corridor. Their armor gleamed under the dim lights. They spoke in low voices, but the human could not understand their language. He only heard sharp sounds like knives striking stone. Then something strange happened. Instead of dragging him away for punishment, the officers opened his cell door. His body shook, expecting pain, but none came. They motioned for him to follow, and when he hesitated, one of them gently pulled his arm. The human had never felt such a touch from an enemy before. They led him through endless corridors, past other locked cells, past shadows that moaned in silence. He saw other prisoners, not human but alien, thin like him, staring with hopeless eyes. For a moment his heart ached, because he knew what it felt like to be forgotten. Finally, they reached a chamber filled with soft white light. He blinked. His eyes burned from the sudden brightness. Inside stood a group of alien healers, their hands glowing with strange devices. They spoke words he could not understand, but their eyes showed no hate. They treated his wounds, washed the dirt from his skin, and gave him water sweeter than anything he had tasted in years. The human did not know why they were doing this. He kept waiting for cruelty to return, but it never did. Instead, the healers gave him new clothes and motioned for him to rest on a soft bed. He almost cried, because he had not felt kindness since before his capture. Days passed, and he was fed with real food, strong soups, warm bread, fruits he had never seen. His body slowly grew stronger, his eyes brighter. The officers visited him often, but they never explained why they had spared him. He tried to ask in broken words, but they only smiled and shook their heads. Then came the greatest shock. One morning the cell gates opened again, but this time he was not led to another chamber. He was brought outside. The prisoner stepped into the fresh air. The sky above was filled with 2 suns, bright and golden. He had not seen the open sky in so long that tears ran down his face. A transport ship waited on the landing pad. The officers guided him inside and handed him a small metal tag with human symbols engraved. He stared at it in disbelief. It was his own military tag, the one he thought lost during capture. How did they have it? Why were they giving it back? The ship lifted into the sky, and he sat quietly, his heart racing. He could not believe this was real. He was being sent home. The aliens who had once been enemies were now sending him back alive. When he reached human territory, the fleet officers were stunned. They had never seen a prisoner of war returned in such a way. Soldiers whispered in shock. Commanders gathered in silence. They asked the human what happened, and he told them everything in simple words. They saved me, they healed me, and they sent me home. The fleet could not understand. Why would the enemy, known for cruelty, do something so rare? But deep inside, they all felt a spark. If one human was saved by mercy, then what would humanity do in return? The rescued man looked into the stars from his window that night. His body was free, but his thoughts were trapped in the faces of the alien prisoners he had seen in the dark corridors. They too had been forgotten, and their eyes begged for salvation. He whispered again to himself, "Humans do not give up, not even on others." What began as a single act of mercy would soon become a storm that would change the galaxy forever. The silent return. The human fleet had not expected to see him alive. When the transport ship landed and the forgotten prisoner stepped out, thin but breathing, the soldiers gathered in disbelief. Some saluted, others whispered, their voices trembling with shock. For years they had carried his name on the lists of the fallen, and yet here he was, walking among them. The commanders quickly pulled him into a private chamber. They asked him questions, one after another. Who had released him? Why did the enemy spare him? What had he seen? His answers were simple, but each word felt heavier than iron. They healed me, they fed me, and they let me go. The officers exchanged uneasy looks. No one trusted the empire that had once burned colonies. destroyed ships and taken lives without mercy. Some believed it was a trap, a trick to lower human defenses. Others wondered if perhaps something had changed within the alien ranks. News of his return spread across the fleet like fire through dry grass. Younger soldiers whispered in the mess halls, "If they saved one of us, does that mean there is hope?" But the veterans shook their heads, saying mercy does not live in the hearts of tyrants. The prisoner, though free, could not rest. Each night he saw again the faces of the other captives in that alien prison, their thin arms reaching through the bars, their eyes filled with silent cries. They had not been released. Only he had been chosen. His heart burned with guilt. The admirals gathered in the War Council chamber. The room was filled with holograms of stars, fleets, and battle lines. One admiral slammed his hand on the table. "We cannot ignore this," he said. "If they returned one of ours, the galaxy is watching. Our answer will shape how we are remembered." Another admiral frowned. "But what is our answer, revenge or gratitude?" The chamber grew silent. Finally, the fleet commander spoke, his voice calm but sharp as a blade. "Humans do not repay kindness with silence if they showed mercy once. We must decide how to respond." Debate tore through the ranks. Some said they should move on, focus on building defenses, ignore this strange act. Others believed humanity should repay the debt. No matter how dangerous, one young officer stood and said firmly, "If they saved one of us, we should return for all of them." His words struck the room like thunder. The prisoner nodded with tears in his eyes. "I saw them," he whispered, "not just humans, but many others locked in cages, weak and forgotten. If we leave them there, we are no better than those who chained them." His words carved through the doubts in the chamber. The admirals leaned back in silence. They knew what he said was true. Humanity's strength had never been only in weapons, but in its refusal to abandon life. Orders were sent across the fleet. Scouts mapped routes into enemy space. Transports were prepared. Medical ships stocked with supplies, but this mission was not to destroy. It was to search, to find, and to free every pilot, every soldier. Every medic knew this would be dangerous, yet their hearts were steady, because it was not war they carried into the stars, but duty still. Whispers spread through the galaxy. Alien empires heard of humanity's strange choice, and many grew afraid. To them, mercy was weakness, but humanity was proving it was something far more dangerous. For if humans came to repay kindness, what would they do if betrayed? The rescued man stood at the window of the flagship as the fleet prepared to depart. He watched the stars flicker, each one a distant world. He thought of the prisoners still waiting in the dark, and he whispered again, "Humans do not give up." When the engines roared to life, the galaxy trembled for the first time in history. A human armada was not marching to war. They were marching to rescue, and no one knew what storms this silent return would bring. Into hostile stars, the fleet left human space in silence. Their engines lit the void, but their purpose was not conquest. The galaxy watched with nervous eyes. Whispers passed from empire to empire. Why are the humans moving so many ships? What are they planning? But no one could answer. The humans carried not only battleships, but medical cruisers, food transports, and shelters. It was unlike any fleet the stars had seen before. This was not a march of destruction, but a mission that looked like hope wrapped in steel. Still, danger surrounded them. The empire whose prison had released the forgotten soldier did not speak. No message of peace, no demand for war, only silence. That silence pressed against the hearts of every crew member. For silence in the galaxy was often more dangerous than open threats. As the fleet passed through border systems, alien watchers trembled. Scouts from other nations trailed them, recording their movements. The humans ignored the whispers, their eyes fixed on the path ahead. Their mission was clear, even if the galaxy could not yet understand it. Aboard the flagship, the rescued soldier stood with the commanders. He pointed at star maps, his voice steady though his hands shook. "Here," he said. "This was the prison, but there are others. I saw them in fragments whispered by guards. Whole camps hidden on barren worlds." The admirals leaned closer, their eyes cold with resolve. Every human in the room understood. They were about to dive into hostile stars where no mercy waited, where enemies expected death, not salvation, and yet they would go as the fleet advanced. Enemy patrols appeared. Alien ships shadowed them, sending warnings across comms. "Turn back. The space is closed," they hissed. But the humans did not turn. Their reply was simple, carried on encrypted channels. "We come for those you have forgotten. Move aside or be remembered for your cruelty." The patrols hesitated. They had seen human fleets before, fleets that burned with vengeance, fleets that broke empires. And though this one carried healers instead of bombs, Its silence was heavier than thunder. Many patrols fled rather than test it, but not all in one system near a dying red sun. Alien destroyers formed a blockade. Their weapons locked, their captains sneered. Humans talk of mercy, but mercy dies here, they declared. The human fleet paused. Their guns remained cold. For a heartbeat it seemed they might retreat. Then the flagship broadcast a single message. We did not come for war, but we will fight if you force us. You held one of ours, and you chose to save him. We are here to return that choice, not only for him, but for all. The silence stretched. The blockade captains looked at their screens, uneasy. Behind the human battleships floated lines of rescue vessels, glowing white with medical lights. Not an armada of conquerors, but an armada of saviors. The sight broke their resolve one by one. The destroyers powered down and drifted aside. The path opened. The human fleet pressed on, deeper into hostile space, every mile heavier. Every system filled with eyes watching from the dark. On some worlds, people prayed at the sight of human ships. On others, rulers cursed, swearing revenge. But humanity did not stop. They searched, scanning for signals of prisons and camps. Each discovery cut into their hearts like a blade, because the rumors were true. The Empire had not only enslaved humans, but many other species left to rot in silence, forgotten by all but themselves. The rescued soldier stood at the viewing deck as one of the first camps appeared on the scanners. A barren moon scarred with pits and fences, his breath caught. The faces he remembered from that dark corridor seemed to whisper again in his ears. Don't leave us, not like this, the commanders gave the order. Dropships prepared. Medics armed themselves not with rifles, but with supplies, yet soldiers still carried weapons, for they knew resistance would come. Rescue and war often walked side by side. As the fleet descended toward the first camp, the galaxy held its breath, for what humanity was about to do would not only free the forgotten, it would shake the balance of stars forever. The hidden camps, the barren moon turned slowly beneath the human fleet. Its surface was scarred with black trenches and broken towers. From above it looked lifeless, but the scanners told another story. Deep underground were tunnels, cages, and thousands of faint life signs, hearts still beating but weak, like candles struggling in the wind. The admirals gave the order. Dropships roared from the carriers, slicing through the thin gray clouds. Inside them sat human soldiers, medics and engineers, all silent. They knew what awaited them, suffering, chains and resistance, yet none turned away. The rescued prisoner sat among them. His hands clenched as he remembered his own years in the cell. He whispered to himself, "They saved me. Now we save them." The dropships landed with thunder. Dust and ash rose, covering the barren ground. Alien guards rushed to meet them, weapons raised. Their voices shouted warnings. "Leave now, humans. This place is forbidden." But the human commander stepped forward, his armor black and shining, his voice calm. "Forbidden by who? By those who chain the weak, by those who fear mercy." Then he raised his hand, and the soldiers moved. The battle erupted. Human rifles burned bright. Alien fire cut the air. But behind the soldiers came medics carrying stretchers. Behind them came engineers cutting into steel gates. Every shot fired was not for conquest, but for passage. Passage into the darkness where the prisoners waited. The tunnels were filled with cries. The prisoners pressed against the bars, eyes wide as human soldiers stormed inside. Some prisoners could not believe what they saw. For years they had known only cruelty. Now strangers had come to free them. One young alien, thin as bone, whispered, "Who are you?" A human medic knelt beside him, covering his wounds with glowing gel. "We are the ones who remember," she said softly. "You are not forgotten." The guards tried to hold their ground, but human determination cut through their defenses like fire through dry leaves. Soon the gates broke open and the prisoners poured out, weak, trembling, but alive. The rescued prisoner walked among them. He held out his hands, his voice breaking. "Come, you are free now, you will not die in cages." Tears fell from eyes that had long forgotten how to cry. The medics worked without rest, bandaging wounds, feeding the hungry, carrying the weak. Engineers built makeshift shelters. Soldiers stood guard at the tunnels, watching for the next wave of enemy ships. Above the moon, the human fleet spread its wings. Medical cruisers opened their bays, ready to take in the rescued. Cargo holds once filled with supplies now overflowed with lives. Lives that the galaxy had written off as lost. News spread faster than light. In distant courts and palaces, rulers shook with rage. The humans dare to break our camps, they dare to change the order of the stars. But in hidden villages and forgotten worlds, people whispered with hope, "The humans are not conquerors. They are saviors." Still, danger grew. As the rescued filled the ships, alarms blared across the fleet. Enemy reinforcements were coming. A swarm of warships rising from hyperspace, ready to crush the humans for their defiance on the flagship. The admirals stood tall. They knew the cost of their mission. Rescue was never free. It came with blood and fire, but none wavered. "Hold the line," the commander said. "Not for war, but for those we carry." The rescued prisoner stood at the viewing deck again. He watched as the rescued were lifted into safety, their faces thin, their eyes bright with new hope. His heart burned with a vow. "We will not stop, not here, not now, if one of us is saved." Then all of us must be saved. As enemy ships closed in, the human fleet formed a shield around the medical cruisers. Their guns lit the stars, but their true strength was not in weapons. It was in the promise they carried. A promise born in one act of mercy, now shaping the fate of the galaxy. And in the dark corridors of other prisons across the stars, captives lifted their heads for the first time in years, because the whispers had reached them too. The humans are coming. The galactic shockwave. The rescue on the barren moon sent waves across the stars. No one expected the humans to risk so much for strangers. Yet now fleets carried thousands of freed prisoners, and every eye in the galaxy turned toward them. On distant worlds, merchants whispered the tale. They did not take slaves, they freed them. In hidden slums, children repeated the words, "The humans came. The humans came." And in royal halls of empires, rulers clenched their fists in fear. The alien High Council met in secret. Their chamber glowed with cold light, shadows dancing across marble walls, voices rose in anger. "Humans will undo everything we built," one lord hissed. "Our camps keep the weak in line. Without fear there is chaos," another spat. But beneath their rage hid trembling, because they all knew humanity was unlike them. The rescued prisoner stood aboard the flagship, watching as fleets regrouped, carrying the weak and broken to safe worlds. His heart ached for those still trapped, but his spirit rose when he saw how humanity moved as one. No colony refused, no ship turned away. All worked together to heal the forgotten. In the galaxy's markets, rumors spread faster than truth. Some claimed humans had unleashed a new weapon. Others said they were building an army of freed slaves. But the truth was far simpler and far more terrifying. Humans did not forget, they remembered mercy, and they repaid it with strength. One empire, fearful of losing control, sent a fleet to intercept. They broadcast their threat to every channel. "Turn over the rescued, or we will burn your ships," the human commander replied with steady voice. "We do not trade lives, we protect them if you attack. History will remember you as enemies of mercy." The galaxy trembled at those words, because it was not just a warning, it was a vow. And when the enemy fleet attacked, the humans did not falter. They fought with fury, forming walls around their medical cruisers. Every ship stood like a shield, refusing to let a single rescued soul fall back into chains. The battle raged for hours, fire and steel filling the void. But slowly the enemy ships broke apart, retreating in shame. The galaxy watched the recordings in silence. Humanity had proven something terrifying. Their mercy was as strong as their wrath. On distant prison worlds, the news reached trembling captives. They clung to each other, whispering, "The humans are coming." Hold on, and hope, once dead, rose again like fire from ashes. Alien rulers tried to twist the tale. Their voices shouted across propaganda streams, "Humans are dangerous. They use mercy as a weapon." But no words could drown the images of human soldiers lifting children from cages. No lies could erase the sight of medics weeping as they carried the broken into the light. The galactic order began to shake. Old alliances cracked, because many species, long oppressed, began to look to humanity with new eyes, not as conquerors but as protectors. And the rulers who had built their power on chains felt fear grow in their hearts. Aboard the flagship, the rescued prisoner stood once more before the admirals, his voice quiet but firm. "This is only the beginning. I saw more camps, more forgotten worlds. We cannot stop now if we stop. The galaxy will return to silence," the admirals nodded, their faces grave. They knew the truth. There was no turning back. Humanity's name was now carved into every star. To some it meant danger. To others it meant hope. But to all it meant change. For no longer could the galaxy hide its cruelties in shadows, not while humans carried light into the darkness. And somewhere far away in secret chambers, the rulers of empires whispered in fear, "If they repay mercy with salvation, then what will they unleash if we betray them again?" The galaxy had learned a lesson that day. Humans did not forget. Humans did not abandon. Humanity's vow. The stars were quiet after the battle. Wrecks of enemy ships floated in the void, their fires fading into cold silence. But aboard the human fleet there was no celebration. Instead there was work. Endless work. Medics rushed through the crowded bays. Treating the rescued, soldiers carried stretchers. Engineers built shelters inside cargo holds. The fleet was no longer just an armada. It was a moving city of hope. The rescued prisoner walked through the medical halls. His eyes filled with tears at the sight. A human nurse fed an alien child with trembling hands. A soldier gave his blanket to a shivering captive. A mechanic sang softly to calm a group of frightened refugees. The galaxy had never seen warriors act this way, not as destroyers but as healers. Word of these acts spread, not through official channels but through whispers. A whisper carried faster than any fleet. The humans will not forget you. Those words became a fire in the hearts of the forgotten. But in the War Council chamber aboard the flagship, the admirals knew the path ahead was dangerous. Enemy empires would not sit silent. Already fleets were gathering. Already propaganda poisoned the airwaves. Humanity had made a choice and there was no retreat. The fleet commander stood before his officers, his voice deep and steady. The galaxy believes we are unpredictable, that we answer cruelty with fury. But let it be known now, we also answer mercy with mercy. And if one act of kindness can save a human, then we will return to save all who are chained. The officers bowed their heads. They understood what this meant. This was no short mission, no passing storm. This was a vow, a promise written not in paper but in blood and stars. When the rescued prisoner spoke, his words shook even the hardened admirals. When I was in that cell, I believed I had been abandoned, but I was wrong. Humanity did not abandon me, and now we will not abandon them. Not one soul, not one world, not one prisoner will be left behind. Those words spread across the fleet. They reached every soldier, every medic, every pilot, and in their hearts the vow was carved. If one was saved, all must be saved. Alien spies reported these words back to their masters. Rulers listened and trembled. Humans have turned mercy into a weapon sharper than war, one whispered. No, not a weapon, another answered, something worse. A promise, because a weapon can be broken. But a promise carried by an entire species cannot be undone. On hidden worlds, slaves whispered the vow. If one was saved, all will be saved. Their voices grew louder, until even their masters heard them echo through the streets. Fear spread through palaces and thrones because rulers knew they could not chain hope. The human fleet pressed deeper into hostile stars, not stopping, not turning. Every new camp they found only fueled their resolve, and every prisoner they freed repeated the vow like a prayer. Humans do not forget soon the vow was no longer just humanity's. It belonged to the rescued as well. Together they formed something new, something greater, an alliance not built by treaties or trade but by a simple truth. Mercy given once will return 1,000 times stronger. The rescued prisoner stood again at the viewing deck. His reflection glowed against the stars. He whispered softly, almost to himself. They thought sparing one life was small, but it became everything. They thought mercy was weakness, but it became our strength. And now we will carry this vow until the galaxy itself remembers it outside. The fleet stretched across the void, its lights burning like a new constellation, a constellation not of war but of promise. And in the shadows of forgotten worlds, countless eyes lifted to the stars, waiting, hoping, whispering the vow, and the shockwave of their mercy would echo forever. A new era of fear and respect. The galaxy was no longer the same. Where once fear alone ruled, now whispers of hope spread across the stars. On hidden worlds, slaves lifted their heads to the sky. On conquered planets, the weak dared to dream again. And everywhere, rulers asked the same question. What will the humans do next? Human fleets now sailed not as conquerors but as guardians. They freed prisoners, carried food to starving worlds, and everywhere they went, the vow followed them. If one of us is saved, then all will be saved. But this vow brought more than hope. It brought fear to those who had built their power on cruelty, because they knew that every camp exposed, every cage broken, was another stone ripped from the foundations of their rule. The alien High Council met once more. Their voices filled the chamber with panic. We must stop them, one cried, before their vow spreads too far, before it burns down our thrones. Yet none of them dared attack openly, because they had seen what humanity could unleash when cornered. In their silence, humanity grew stronger. Alliances formed not by treaties but by gratitude. Species once forgotten now offered loyalty. They swore to fight beside humans not because of fear, but because of respect. Aboard the flagship, the rescued prisoner stood again with the admirals. He was no longer weak, no longer broken. His eyes burned with strength. "This vow is not only ours," he said. "It belongs to every being who was ever forgotten. Together we will change this galaxy." The commander nodded. "Then let it be written in the stars. We will remember mercy, we will honor it. But let all know this as well. If mercy is betrayed, our wrath will be greater than any storm." Those words spread like fire. To some they were a promise of safety. To others they were a warning of doom, and both were true. The prisoners freed from the camps carried the vow to their people. They told of human soldiers who fought not for conquest but for strangers. They told of medics who cried as they healed wounds. They told of fleets that risked everything for lives that were not their own, and their stories became legend. Children whispered the vow before they slept. Rebels carved it into walls and in the darkest prisons. Captives repeated it like prayer. The humans are coming. Humans do not forget. For the first time in countless years, tyrants trembled at the sound of hope. Because hope once born was impossible to chain. Humanity did not seek thrones, they did not seek crowns, but in the hearts of the galaxy, they earned something greater. Fear from rulers, respect from the weak, and a place in history that no empire could erase. The rescued prisoner stood at the viewing deck one last time. The stars shone before him, endless and bright. He remembered the cell where he had once believed himself forgotten, and he smiled. Because that cell had not been the end of his story. It had been the spark. Behind him, the fleet stretched across the night, its lights blazing like a promise carved into the void. And across 1,000 worlds, voices whispered the same words. Humans never forget. Humans never abandon. Humans return for all. And so a new era began. Not of war alone, but of mercy that burned brighter than any weapon. An era where humanity's vow shaped the fate of stars forever.